The readings of this 11th Sunday fall well in this year of mercy, and also in some way sum up the thrust of the Gospel itself. Luke is the Gospel writer who, in a very special way, underlines and underscores the whole mystery of the divine mercy. And we have in this 7th chapter something which is worth looking into in some detail. The first reading of all, that from the second book of Samuel, is placed in this Sunday's liturgy as a backdrop, showing how the great King David, although he had fallen gravely, is not irrecuperable, indicating how the Lord, even from this sin, draws good. Some beautiful penitential psalms come from the pen and heart of David as a result of his being retrieved and recuperated by the divine mercy. These psalms will be sung until the end of time here on earth, and even in our liturgy we hear them often. The 50th, for instance, is heard every Friday morning at Lord's. Now, the whole thrust also of mercy comes through in the writing of St. Paul to the Galatians. He had been there and had been, unfortunately, contravened and contradicted by people who came after him to in some way re-evangelize in a more Judaic form and manner what he had already done. And so he has to write back to these people evangelized initially by himself to indicate that they were not to pay heed to these people who were wanting to go back to the comfort zone of the law and its requirements, as though justification were to be obtained from observance of the same. We know how Martin Luther, during the Protestant Revolution, zoomed into this one and also into the Epistle to the Romans, trying to pull out more than actually was in there. One cannot go as far as he went. And we know that to make a point, he went also as far as throwing into the river Elba the Epistle of St. James, which he referred to as an epistle of straw. Despite the fact that he did translate all the New Testament, he wasn't amused when he found so much insistence on works. Well, it's not a question of either or, but both and the dogmatic parts of the Council of Trent did go into this question of justification, indicating that there is an element of collaboration on the part of man. It is not just simply a question of allowing the Father to impute the justice of Christ to man. There has to be an acceptance and a collaboration. Otherwise one gets into what is actually a modern evangelical heresy of tending sometimes to think that one is saved and then to carry on regardless with certain personal habits, as though it's all been taken care of. Well, that's not fair. And I've noticed actually that even evangelicals themselves react against this abuse of the notion of the imputation of the merits of Christ. One has to be coherent. So this element of collaboration and cooperation has to be there. One is washed in the precious blood of Jesus, but one then behaves accordingly. And we also know that the whole question of the way in which grace behaves and acts is a mystery. It was something which was argued for a long time between theologians, Suarez versus Molinos and so on, way back. And the fact is that the Vatican actually in the end had to stop these quarrels, saying that theological schools were allowed to discuss things, but they shouldn't get into this kind of attitude. It's not either or, because mysteries of this nature are in the heart of the Blessed Trinity, and we do not know all as regards the way that God works in the depths of the soul. It's just too profound and too mysterious and too individual. So it is that we just have vague outlines, but they're sufficient for us, that we have to be in a state of grace which is already prevenient. That is to say that even the first tug comes from divine grace. So the capacity to say yes already comes from divine grace. The first movement is always from divine grace. And it's called prevenient grace. That is, grace that comes first, prevenio. So it is always from divine initiative, but we have to collaborate, and when we don't, it is this expression of hardness of heart which comes in. We are deflecting grace, and grace deflected and refused in the end has the effect of allowing the soul to be hardened, in the sense that grace withdraws, and therefore we find ourselves under our own resources. Because if grace insists and insists and insists and covers us and covers us and covers us, then we are actually damaged even more, because we are responsible for every no that we emit by these refusals each time to accept the divine proposal of mercy. That this question is therefore partly human, and therefore there is an element of genuine responsibility, and this we cannot avoid. And it is not sufficient either to think that when we are, in inverted commas, saved, as the born-again Christians would say, then we automatically will make it. That is actually an error. We can fall back, and even we have in the writings of St. Paul a warning about that we can actually fall back, because there is this element of if we persevere coming in the clear writings of St. Paul, and also the sayings of our Lord himself. We cannot just presume. It's not enough to have one experience of mercy and then to presume. We have to keep at it. We know that when we're driving a car, if one does not keep one's foot on the accelerator, well, one loses speed. Therefore, one has to keep one's foot on the accelerator just to keep even the same speed. Well, it's the same in the spiritual life. We're fighting against friction, we're fighting against all kinds of opposition, forces from underneath, and also our human nature in itself. Therefore, we have to keep on pressing the accelerator just even to stay put at the same speed and not to become stagnant and therefore go behind. Therefore, we have to have a structure which allows grace always to be the prime mover in our whole organism. The spiritual organism has to be looked after, and therefore we have to be growing in relationship and having moments in which God can actually still let us feel his movements of grace. So it's not just a one-off. And it also applies to all walks of Christian life. If in the sacred sphere of vocation we content ourselves with an initial yes, then we're in danger of becoming functional and again becoming hard of heart. We can get into mode of automatic pilot, and we do not advance or even think of advancing. We've got a system and we've got a comfort zone. It's a danger. So this element of personal relationship comes through very clearly in the gospel itself. What is going on here? We have a Pharisee who has precisely, presumably, a good will at the bottom, because he is respecting the Lord and wanting to honor a guest. But he is self-sufficient, and he has a well-constructed system, and woe betide anyone who challenges it. He is mentally criticizing the Lord, and the Lord hears it, the Lord knows it, the Lord intuits it, the Lord has knowledge, and he answers him without even a word having been said. That is interesting. He answers his thoughts, and he's dead on, he's bang on, and he indicates where the problem is. Here we have a woman who was rather like King David, coming out of a bad experience, but she had been graced somehow in a way which is not actually described in the gospel. She had come to an encounter with divine grace, and she is here in the outworking of that. The actual wording in the Greek is an echo of the Semitic expression. Hoti, because she has loved much, can be taken two ways. It can be since she has loved much, or she has loved much and therefore there must have been already a reason for this, because this is the proof of what was already there. In other words, one is the cause, the other is the effect. Now, modern interpreters would tend to say that this is the effect, not the cause of forgiveness, but the forgiveness has taken place, and therefore she has been able to express that in this love. And in fact, that's the version that the Jerusalem Bible takes in the reading that we have publicly here in this Gospel today. She must have been forgiven since she has expressed it in this way. Now, the actual wording is as follows. For this reason, I tell you that her sins, her many sins, must have been forgiven her, or she would not have shown such great love. It is a paraphrase, but it gives the thrust. Now, with regard to what is going on here, there is a scene which is actually quite dramatic and would have been for this Pharisee quite alarming. We know how keen they were on maintaining legal purity with regard to all kinds of touching, and therefore contamination would enter the soul through the body for them. Well, here we have the Lord accepting the language that this woman had and encountering her where she is and piercing her soul with his tender regard. He accepts this. There is warmth here in this broken person which was not in the hardened heart of the professional believer. The Pharisee was comfortable and was not able to have these emotions because he was self-sufficient and needed no more with regard to huge forgiveness. Here, on the other hand, we have a broken vessel, and we have the Lord coming into that and accepting the humility of this person. Humility warms the soul, does it not, of the person that we come to it with. Humility in our hearts, it opens and begs entrance. A person who is proud and self-sufficient does not attract in the same way our sympathy. And this element of waste, what is she doing? She is breaking her own instruments of work. She would have been actually using this precious ointment to make herself beautiful and attractive. She is breaking her profession. She is breaking all. She is giving what is most precious to her. And she is expressing gratitude, which is something that we don't express or feel if it is something that we feel we are owed. A child that no longer expresses gratitude, or even a husband that no longer expresses gratitude, is very off-putting. We become spoilt, and we become spoilt also by abuse of divine grace. Now, this actually is something that we can take with us, for in the sacramental sphere it happens too. One notices sometimes that one is in the confession box on a Saturday evening while the church is filling up for the evening mass, and one has many people there actually just in front of the box, and there is no thought in their mind about coming into that box. In other words, there's a situation of self-sufficiency out there as well. And with regard to Holy Communion, we have acquired rights, have we not? It is correct that everyone should be receiving what is his due, his rights. Well, this humble sinner was in the attitude the Lord wanted and still wants when it comes to his offers of grace and encounter and intimacy. He allows us to feel his intimacy when we come to him in this spirit of humility. If we come full of ourselves, then we will go back full of ourselves. If we come in a spirit of true emptiness, we can be filled. We notice that the person who is genuinely aware that he's made a big mistake has actually learnt more than the person who has made no mistakes, in inverted commas. And we notice also that very often in the lives of the saints, a huge catapult effect has been had from a fall. The likes of St. Augustine come back with a vengeance, but they can also say, I've been there, and they can meet others in that place, which self-sufficient souls with difficulty are able to do. They're just too much above the others to get into them.
There is a place where peace and mercy meet, where humankind the rays of Godhead can in darkness greet, and healing find. There is a manhood where divinity looks out to us from all eternity. O stream of light, O beam of ancient grace, given in this hour, for us who in this tender face behold the power that uttered time, that in the moments be, I see this gaze that waited long for me. O Master, draw me close to this soft heat that melts in this, the coldness of the heart where all things meet, except thy bliss, and in a smile